My ex-best friend gave my baby sister food poisoning as a prank. When she collapsed, he laughed and said, "Natural selection." I made sure he never laughed again. My best friend Marcus thought poisoning my 18-month-old sister was hilarious. By the time I was done with him, he was begging me to stop ruining his life, but I was just getting started. Marcus and I had been best friends since middle school. We did everything together: video games, sports, school projects, family dinners. My parents treated him like a second son, and his family welcomed me the same way. I should have seen the warning signs earlier. Marcus had always enjoyed pranks that went too far. In 7th grade, he put super glue on a teacher's chair and laughed when she needed medical attention to remove her stuck clothing. In high school, he convinced a girl to meet him at a fake party, then filmed her crying when she realized no one was coming. He called it social experiments and claimed people needed to learn not to be so trusting. When my parents adopted my baby sister Lily, Marcus seemed genuinely excited. He helped paint her nursery, bought her toys, and always asked about her development. Lily adored him, clapping whenever he visited and reaching for him with tiny hands. I thought he cared about her. I was wrong. Lily was born with severe food allergies: dairy, nuts, eggs, shellfish. Her list of restrictions was extensive. Even trace amounts could trigger reactions ranging from vomiting to anaphylactic shock. Our entire family had learned to read ingredient labels obsessively. Marcus knew about her allergies. He'd been present for multiple emergency room visits when she'd accidentally been exposed to allergens. He'd seen her hooked up to IVs, watched my parents pace hospital hallways, witnessed the terror on everyone's faces during her worst reactions. The incident happened during Marcus's graduation party at his house. My parents and I brought Lily along, planning to stay just an hour for cake and congratulations. Lily was having a good day, smiling and babbling from her stroller. Marcus offered to watch her while my parents talked to his mom about college plans. I was across the yard playing cornhole with other friends, keeping one eye on them both. I saw Marcus give Lily something from his plate. She happily ate whatever he'd offered, making her excited eating sounds. When I asked what he'd given her, he said just some plain crackers from the veggie tray. 20 minutes later, Lily started crying. Not her normal fussy cry, but the distinctive wail that meant something was wrong. My mother rushed over and immediately saw the hives spreading across Lily's face and arms. "What did she eat?" Mom demanded, already reaching for the emergency medication bag. "Just crackers," Marcus said innocently, the plain ones from the tray. But as Mom administered Lily's rescue medication, Marcus started giggling. Not nervous laughter, but genuine amusement. He was filming Lily's reaction on his phone. "This is hilarious," he whispered to his friend Jake. "Look how red she's getting." My blood turned to ice. "Marcus, what did you actually give her?" His grin widened. "Cheese crackers." I wanted to see if her allergies were really that bad or if your parents were just being dramatic. The emergency room visit lasted 6 hours. Lily needed IV steroids and constant monitoring as her body fought the allergic reaction. She was miserable, covered in hives, struggling to breathe normally. Marcus showed up at the hospital, still holding his phone. "Is she okay?" he asked my father. "I got some great footage of the reaction. You should see how crazy she looked." My father, normally the most peaceful man alive, told Marcus to leave immediately or security would escort him out. Marcus laughed and said he was just documenting natural selection in action. That's when I knew our friendship was over. But ending the friendship wasn't enough. I needed everyone to know what kind of person Marcus really was. I started with his phone. During the chaos at the hospital, Marcus had left it charging at his house. I knew his passcode. We'd shared everything for years. I retrieved it before going home. The evidence I found was sickening. Videos of Lily's reaction taken from multiple angles. Text messages to friends joking about testing the defective baby. A group chat where he'd planned the entire incident, researching Lily's specific allergies and calculating minimum doses needed to trigger reactions. But that wasn't all. His phone contained documentation of years of pranks targeting vulnerable people. Videos of him tripping elderly people, giving laxatives to lactose-intolerant classmates, spreading rumors that led to a girl attempting suicide. Marcus was a predator who enjoyed causing pain. I copied everything to multiple devices and cloud accounts. Then I began planning my response. First, I shared the evidence with school administration. Marcus was set to start college in the fall with a partial athletic scholarship. The university needed to know what kind of person they were accepting. The videos showing him deliberately poisoning a baby made school officials sick. They immediately contacted the college to share their concerns. Marcus's scholarship was revoked within 48 hours. Next, I reached out to every person Marcus had victimized over the years. Many had suffered in silence, believing they were his only target. Learning about his pattern gave them courage to speak up. Sarah, the girl he'd humiliated with the fake party invitation, had developed social anxiety so severe she'd dropped out of multiple activities. She'd kept the messages where Marcus admitted it was all a setup to embarrass her. Tom, a classmate with IBS, had suffered through months of stomach problems after Marcus secretly added dairy to his lunches. He'd never connected his worsening symptoms to Marcus's helpful offers to share food. The elderly man Marcus had tripped outside the grocery store had broken his hip and spent weeks in rehabilitation. Store security footage showed Marcus deliberately placing his foot in the man's path. I compiled everything into a comprehensive document, dozens of incidents incidents, hundreds of pieces of evidence, all showing the same pattern of targeted cruelty disguised as humor. Then I made sure everyone saw it. I created a website called The Real Marcus Thompson and uploaded everything: videos, screenshots, witness statements, medical records where victims consented to share them. The site included a timeline showing escalation from minor pranks to serious assault. Marcus's college friends found the site when they Googled his name before freshman orientation. His roommate assignment got changed immediately. The fraternity that had been recruiting him withdrew their offer. The local news picked up Lily's story after I provided them with exclusive footage Marcus had recorded. Local teen deliberately poisons baby for social media content generated immediate outrage. Marcus's summer job at his uncle's construction company ended when the story went viral. No one wanted to work alongside someone who thought poisoning babies was entertaining. His parents were horrified when they saw the evidence. They'd raised him with strong values, never suspecting the monster he'd become behind their backs. They apologized to our family and committed to getting Marcus professional help. Marcus himself oscillated between denial and rage. He claimed the evidence was fabricated, that I'd edited videos to make him look bad. But digital forensics experts confirmed everything was authentic. When denial failed, he tried intimidation. He showed up at our house demanding I take down the website. He threatened to sue for defamation, to ruin my college prospects, to make my life as miserable as I'd made his. I recorded every threat and added them to the website. The criminal charges came next. Deliberately giving allergens to someone with known sensitivities qualified as assault. The district attorney reviewed the hospital records and security footage from Marcus's party. Marcus was arrested on charges of assault, child endangerment, and reckless endangerment. The case made national news as an example of social media pranks gone dangerously wrong. His defense attorney tried arguing that Marcus was just a kid who'd made a mistake, that he didn't understand the severity of Lily's allergies, but the evidence showed extensive premeditation and research. Text messages revealed Marcus had Googled how much dairy to cause allergic reaction and can baby die from food allergy. He'd calculated dosages and planned recording angles. The poisoning was methodical, not impulsive. The plea deal included jail time, probation, community service, and mandatory psychological evaluation. Marcus would also pay all of Lily's medical expenses and couldn't contact our family for 5 years. But legal consequences were just the beginning. Marcus's social media accounts were flooded with comments from people who'd seen the news coverage. His Instagram posts about college excitement got replies asking why he'd poisoned a baby. Dating became impossible when potential romantic interests discovered his history. Any girl who Googled his name found detailed documentation of his cruelty toward women and children. College applications for the following year were disasters. Even schools that might have overlooked his criminal record couldn't ignore the public documentation of his character. Marcus tried creating new social media accounts under different names, but the evidence was too comprehensive. Someone always recognized him and shared links to the website. His family moved to another state to escape the constant reminders, but the internet doesn't respect geographical boundaries. His reputation followed them everywhere. Marcus attempted suicide 6 months after the trial. His note blamed me for destroying his life, claimed he couldn't live with the constant shame and rejection. I felt no sympathy. He targeted vulnerable people for years, including a baby who couldn't defend herself. The shame was appropriate. His suicide attempt failed, and he was hospitalized for psychiatric treatment. The doctors diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder and recommended long-term therapy. 2 years later, Marcus was working at a gas station under his manager's constant supervision. His boss knew about his history and watched him carefully for signs of manipulative behavior toward customers. He'd applied to over 50 colleges and been rejected by all of them. The website remained the top search result for his name, ensuring no institution would risk their reputation by accepting him. Marcus tried reaching out through mutual acquaintances, asking if I'd consider taking down the website. He claimed he'd learned from his mistakes, found God, committed himself to making amends. I told them he could start making amends by confessing to every person he'd ever victimized and paying for their therapy. Until then, the website stayed up. Lily, meanwhile, was thriving. At 3 years old, she was developing normally despite her allergies. Our family had learned to manage her condition without constant fear. She had no memory of Marcus or what he'd done to her. Sometimes I watched her playing and wondered what her reaction would be if she knew someone had deliberately tried to harm her as a baby. The other victims Marcus had targeted found healing through speaking out. Sarah had returned to social activities after therapy helped her process the deliberate humiliation. Tom's stomach problems resolved once he understood they'd been caused by deliberate poisoning. The elderly man Marcus had injured became an advocate for protecting vulnerable people from predators who disguise cruelty as entertainment. Our family used the experience to educate others about recognizing manipulative behavior in young people. We spoke at schools and conferences about the warning signs they'd missed in Marcus. Marcus's parents divorced 2 years after the trial. His mother couldn't reconcile her memories of raising him with the evidence of his cruelty. His father struggled with guilt over failing to recognize his son's dangerous behavior. The construction company Marcus's uncle owned suffered reputation damage until they publicly cut all ties with the family. Community trust needed to be rebuilt through demonstrating better judgment about employee character. Marcus's former friends distanced themselves completely. They changed social media settings to private, deleted photos that included him, and refused interview requests about their experiences. Jake, who'd been present during Lily's poisoning, transferred schools rather than face daily reminders of his failure to intervene. His guilt motivated him to become an advocate for bystander intervention. 3 years after the incident, Marcus's therapist contacted me through proper legal channels. She couldn't discuss details of his treatment, but wanted to know if I'd consider meeting with him as part of his rehabilitation process. I declined. Some actions don't deserve forgiveness, regardless of the perpetrator's claimed growth. The website remained active, serving as a warning to potential future victims. I updated it annually with any new information about Marcus's activities or attempts to rebuild his reputation. College admissions officers used the site as a case study in thoroughly vetting applicants. The documentation helped them understand how manipulative individuals could present false personas during application processes. Marcus eventually moved across the country and legally changed his name, but digital footprints are difficult to erase completely. People who knew him before shared identifying information whenever he tried establishing new identities. His attempts to reinvent himself always failed when someone recognized his face or behavior patterns. The predatory mindset that had made him target Lily remained evident in smaller interactions. Employers who hired him without thorough background checks quickly regretted their decisions. He struggled to maintain professional relationships when colleagues discovered his history. 5 years later, I graduated college and started working in cybersecurity. My experience documenting Marcus's crimes had taught me valuable skills in digital investigation and evidence preservation. I specialized in helping families protect themselves from online predators and cyberbullies. The work felt meaningful, using my painful experience to prevent others from suffering similar trauma. Marcus's case became a cautionary tale in my professional presentations. I showed how comprehensive documentation could hold accountable people who thought their cruelty would go unpunished. Lily started kindergarten with no knowledge of why our family was so careful about her food. We decided to tell her the full story when she was old enough to understand, but for now she lived without fear. She was popular with classmates and teachers, known for her kindness and empathy. Sometimes I wondered if surviving Marcus's attack had somehow strengthened her natural compassion. Our family had healed from the trauma, but we remained vigilant about protecting Lily from people who might target her vulnerabilities. The experience with Marcus had taught us that predators often wear friendly faces. The website documenting Marcus's crimes received thousands of visitors annually. Parents used it to teach children about recognizing manipulative behavior. Educators shared it as an example of accountability in the digital age. Marcus's story served as a warning that actions have consequences, even when the perpetrator is young or claims they were just joking. Deliberately harming others, especially vulnerable people, destroys trust permanently. Legal experts cited the case when discussing the evolution of assault laws in the digital age. Marcus's conviction helped establish precedents for prosecuting social media-motivated crimes against children. 10 years later, I married a woman who understood the importance of protecting innocent people from predators. We planned to have children, and were already discussing how to keep them safe from manipulative individuals. Lily was in middle school, excelling academically and socially. She'd learned to manage her allergies independently and advocated for other children with medical conditions. Marcus was in his late 20s, still struggling to maintain stable employment or relationships. His name change and relocation had provided temporary relief, but his fundamental character remained unchanged. The website continued serving as a permanent record of his crimes. Every year on the anniversary of Lily's poisoning, I updated it with current information about the ongoing consequences of his actions. Some people criticized the website as excessive punishment for teenage mistakes. They argued Marcus deserved a chance to rebuild his life without constant reminders of his past. But Lily could have died from his prank. He'd researched her allergies specifically to cause maximum harm while maintaining plausible deniability. The premeditation and cruelty deserved permanent consequences. I'd learned that protecting innocent people sometimes requires refusing to forgive those who target them. Marcus had shown no genuine remorse, only anger at facing accountability. The elderly man he'd injured, Sarah, whom he'd humiliated, Tom, whom he'd poisoned, they all deserved to know about his pattern before becoming his victims. My documentation had prevented future harm. Lily was now 13, beautiful and confident despite her medical challenges. She'd never known Marcus, never experienced the trauma he'd planned for her. She grew up surrounded by people who valued her life above their entertainment. That was the victory. Not Marcus's destroyed reputation or failed future, but Lily's thriving life. She got to grow up safe because someone had documented the truth about a predator who targeted babies for laughs. The website would remain online indefinitely. Future employers, potential romantic partners, and community members deserve to know what Marcus was capable of when he thought no one was watching. Some predators change, most don't. The evidence suggested Marcus fell into the latter category. Protecting innocent people from those who would harm them wasn't revenge, it was responsibility. Marcus had made his choices. I I'd simply made sure everyone knew what those choices revealed about his character. The truth has power, and sometimes the truth is the best protection society has against those who prey on the vulnerable. But the story doesn't end with Marcus's consequences. 3 years after creating the website, something happened that changed everything again. I was working late at my cybersecurity firm when I got a call from an unknown number. Usually I don't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this the person who made the website about Marcus Thompson? The voice was female, young, nervous. Who's asking? My name is Rebecca Martinez. I think Marcus is targeting my little brother. I felt my stomach drop. Where are you? Rebecca was calling from Arizona. Marcus had apparently moved there using his new identity and was working as a camp counselor at a summer program for special needs children. He seemed perfect, Rebecca explained. Great with kids, patient, enthusiastic, but I saw him filming my brother during what looked like a reaction to something. When I Googled his fake name, nothing came up, but a friend recognized his face from your website. Marcus had found the perfect hunting ground. Children with disabilities, parents grateful for any adult who showed patience with their kids, and a system that didn't thoroughly vet seasonal employees. I booked a flight to Arizona that night. The camp was called Sunshine Adventures and marketed itself as an inclusive program for children with special needs. Their brochures showed happy kids swimming, doing arts and crafts, and playing games with caring counselors. Marcus was featured prominently in their promotional materials. Clean-cut, smiling, surrounded by children who clearly trusted him. He'd completely reinvented his image. Rebecca met me at the airport. She was a college sophomore, working as a volunteer at the camp while visiting her family. Her 8-year-old brother David had autism and severe food allergies, the perfect target for Marcus's twisted experiments. I found this on his phone, Rebecca said, showing me a video file. He left it unlocked in the staff room. The video showed David eating something Marcus had given him, followed by the beginning of an allergic reaction. Marcus's voice could be heard off camera, making the same amused comments I remembered from Lily's poisoning. Natural selection, he said as David started scratching his arms. Darwin would be proud. We needed more evidence before involving authorities. One video might not be enough to convict Marcus, and I couldn't risk him disappearing to target children elsewhere. I checked into a hotel near the camp and began surveillance. Rebecca provided inside information about schedules and activities, while I gathered external evidence. What I discovered was a systematic pattern of abuse spanning the entire summer program. Marcus had been testing various children's sensitivities and medical conditions. Videos on his phone showed him exposing diabetic children to excessive sugar, triggering seizures in epileptic kids, and deliberately causing allergic reactions in multiple victims. He'd convinced parents these incidents were accidental, just bad luck that always seemed to happen when Marcus was the supervising counselor. The parents were grateful for his apparent concern and quick response to medical emergencies he'd secretly caused. The camp director praised Marcus as their most dedicated counselor. He worked extra hours, volunteered for the most challenging assignments, and seemed genuinely committed to helping special needs children. No one suspected he was systematically torturing them for entertainment. I contacted Tom and Sarah, Marcus's previous victims who'd testified at his trial. They flew to Arizona immediately to help document the new crimes. Tom had become a special education teacher, motivated by his own experience with Marcus's cruelty. His expertise helped us understand the long-term damage Marcus was inflicting on these vulnerable children. Sarah worked for a nonprofit that protected children from abuse. She knew how to gather evidence properly and connect with traumatized victims. Together we built an airtight case. The hardest part was watching Marcus interact with the children while we gathered evidence. He was patient, kind, and seemingly devoted to their well-being. His public persona was perfectly crafted to hide his predatory nature. During craft time, he helped a girl with Down syndrome make a bracelet for her mother. During swimming lessons, he patiently worked with a boy who was afraid of water. To casual observers, he seemed like an ideal counselor, but I knew what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Rebecca discovered Marcus's real phone hidden in his cabin. Unlike the work phone the camp provided, this device contained the evidence we needed. Hundreds of videos documenting planned abuse, group chats with other predators sharing techniques for targeting disabled children, research into specific medical conditions, and how to exploit them for maximum suffering. Most disturbing were the messages about Lily from 3 years earlier. Marcus had shared footage of her poisoning with other predators, using it as proof of his expertise in targeting vulnerable children. The camp had unknowingly hired someone who viewed their students as experimental subjects. We coordinated with FBI agents who specialized in crimes against children. The evidence we'd gathered supported federal charges for child abuse, conspiracy, and distribution of exploitation materials. The raid happened during afternoon activities. Marcus was leading a nature walk when agents arrested him in front of the children he'd been abusing. His mask finally slipped completely. As handcuffs clicked around his wrists, he screamed that the children deserved whatever happened to them, that society was too weak to accept natural selection. The children he'd been caring for watched in confusion as their trusted counselor revealed his true nature. 43 separate charges were filed against Marcus. Every incident documented on his phones, every child he'd deliberately harmed, every parent he'd deceived. The camp immediately shut down pending investigation. investigation. The director had to answer how they'd hired someone with Marcus's history without discovering his true identity. Parents learned their children's medical emergencies hadn't been accidents, but deliberate attacks by someone they'd trusted. The betrayal was devastating. David's mother collapsed when she learned Marcus had been systematically poisoning her son while she thanked him for his dedication. Months of mysterious symptoms suddenly made terrible sense. The other families faced similar revelations: seizures, allergic reactions, diabetic episodes, all caused by the counselor they'd praised for his quick response to medical emergencies. Marcus's trial became a federal case due to the interstate nature of his crimes and the use of technology to distribute abuse materials. The evidence was overwhelming: hundreds of videos, thousands of messages, testimony from dozens of victims spanning nearly a decade. Marcus's defense attorney tried arguing that he had a mental illness that diminished his responsibility, but the premeditation and careful planning proved he understood exactly what he was doing. Expert witnesses explained that Marcus met the clinical definition of a sadistic predator who specifically targeted vulnerable victims for entertainment. The sentencing phase included victim impact statements from families across multiple states. Parents described the long-term trauma their children experienced after discovering their trusted caregiver had been torturing them. Lily, now 6 years old, was too young to testify, but my parents provided a statement about the lasting impact of Marcus's original attack on our family. Marcus received 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. The judge called him a dangerous predator who specifically targets society's most vulnerable members. Additional lawsuits from victims' families ensured Marcus would never have assets to rebuild his life after prison. His financial future was destroyed along with his freedom. The camp director faced criminal charges for negligent hiring practices. Background checks should have revealed Marcus's true identity and criminal history. The case prompted nationwide changes in how organizations vet employees who work with vulnerable populations. Marcus's ability to reinvent himself had exposed dangerous gaps in protection systems. Rebecca became an advocate for stronger background check requirements. Her quick thinking and courage had prevented Marcus from continuing his abuse pattern. The website documenting Marcus's crimes expanded to include his latest victims. The evidence now spanned over a decade, showing clear escalation from isolated incidents to systematic predation. Law enforcement agencies used the site as a training resource for identifying patterns of predatory behavior. Marcus's case illustrated how abusers evolved their tactics while maintaining consistent targeting preferences. 5 years later, I received a letter from the federal prison where Marcus was serving his sentence. He claimed to have found religion and wanted to apologize for his past actions. The letter was a transparent manipulation attempt, full of religious language but lacking genuine accountability. He blamed childhood trauma, mental illness, and social influences while minimizing his deliberate choices. I forwarded the letter to his victims' families without responding. They deserved to know he was still trying to manipulate people, even from prison. Marcus's parents had permanently cut contact after the federal trial. They'd finally accepted that their son was irredeemably dangerous and needed to be kept away from vulnerable people. His attempts to connect with outside supporters always failed when people discovered the full scope of his crimes. No advocacy group wanted to associate with someone who targeted disabled children. Lily was now 11, thriving in middle school and completely unaware of the monster who'd once targeted her. She volunteered with younger children, showing the empathy and kindness Marcus had tried to destroy. Her resilience and compassion proved that Marcus's cruelty hadn't won. She'd grown into exactly the kind of person who protects others from predators. The families whose children Marcus had abused at the camp found healing through connecting with each other. They created a support network for parents of children who'd been victimized by trusted caregivers. David, Rebecca's brother, recovered from the systematic poisoning with proper medical care and therapy. His autism had made it difficult for him to communicate what was happening, but loving support helped him heal. The special needs advocacy community used Marcus's case to push for stronger protections for vulnerable children. His systematic abuse had exposed how predators could exploit trust and authority to target defenseless victims. Marcus's federal conviction became precedent for prosecuting predators who specifically target disabled victims. The enhanced sentences reflected society's commitment to protecting vulnerable populations. 10 years after creating the original website, I was contacted by criminology researchers studying predatory patterns. Marcus's case had become a textbook example of how childhood cruelty escalates into systematic abuse without intervention. The researchers found that Marcus's pattern, targeting vulnerable individuals while maintaining a helpful public persona, was more common than previously understood. Their work helped train professionals to recognize warning signs. Marcus would be eligible for release when he was in his 40s, assuming he served his full sentence. But his documented pattern made parole unlikely, and his name remained permanently associated with child abuse. The website would remain online indefinitely, serving as a warning about what happened when predators thought they could target innocent people without consequences. Sometimes protection required refusing to let time heal wounds that needed to stay visible. Marcus's victims deserved a permanent record of what he'd done into them. Lily was now 15, beautiful and confident, planning to study medicine so she could help other children with medical conditions. Her life's purpose had grown from surviving Marcus's attack. She didn't know the full details of what Marcus had done, but she understood that some people tried to hurt others and that good people had to stand up against them. That lesson, that protecting innocent people sometimes required refusing to forgive those who targeted them, was Marcus's unintended legacy. He'd thought harming vulnerable children would bring him power and entertainment. Instead, he'd created a network of advocates committed to ensuring no predator could hide behind false compassion. The truth about Marcus Thompson remained permanently documented, searchable, and undeniable. Every potential victim who Googled his name found complete information about his history of targeting vulnerable people. That was justice, not his destroyed life, but the protected lives of countless children who would never become his victims because someone had documented the truth about who he really was. But there was one final twist that no one saw coming. 15 years after I first created the website about Marcus, I received an email that changed everything. The sender was Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a forensic psychiatrist who had been studying Marcus's case as part of a larger research project. "I have information about Marcus Thompson that you need to know," she wrote. "Can we speak privately?" Dr. Walsh had been part of a federal task force investigating organized networks of predators who targeted vulnerable children. During their investigation, they'd discovered something horrifying about Marcus's activities. He hadn't been working alone. The group chat messages I'd found on his phone years earlier weren't just casual conversations with other predators. They were part of a sophisticated network that shared techniques, identified targets, and even coordinated attacks across multiple states. Marcus had been a mid-level operative in what authorities now called the Vulnerability Network, a group of predators who specifically targeted children with disabilities, medical conditions, and other exploitable weaknesses. "We've been tracking this network for 3 years, Dr. Walsh explained during our phone call. Marcus's arrest and your documentation of his methods gave us the breakthrough we needed to identify the larger organization. The network had over 200 members across the United States and Canada. They posed as teachers, counselors, medical professionals, and caregivers to gain access to vulnerable children. Marcus's detailed documentation of his crimes had served as training materials for new recruits." My stomach dropped as Dr. Walsh explained the scope of what they had uncovered. Lily's poisoning hadn't been an isolated incident of teenage cruelty. It had been part of a systematic campaign to test methods that could be replicated by other network members. "Your website actually helped us identify victims," Dr. Walsh continued. "Other families recognized similar patterns in their own experiences and came forward with evidence. The FBI had spent 2 years building cases against network members. They'd waited to make arrests until they could take down the entire organization simultaneously. Operation Sanctuary, as they called it, resulted in the largest child predator bust in federal history. 200 arrests across 47 states, involving predators who had systematically targeted thousands of vulnerable children over nearly a decade. Marcus's prison sentence was extended to life without parole as authorities revealed his role in coordinating network activities. His detailed documentation had helped train predators who'd gone on to abuse hundreds of children. The scope was overwhelming. Children in hospitals, special education programs, summer camps, and therapy centers had all been targeted by network members who shared Marcus's methods. But there was something even more disturbing. The network had been studying my response to Marcus's crimes, using my documentation techniques against other families. They'd learned how to hide evidence, create false digital trails, and manipulate public opinion from analyzing how I'd exposed Marcus. "They called you the documentarian," Dr. Walsh explained. "Your website became required reading for network members who wanted to avoid similar exposure. I felt sick realizing that my efforts to protect Lily had inadvertently helped other predators evade justice." Dr. Walsh assured me that wasn't my fault. "Your documentation ultimately brought down the entire network. Without your evidence about Marcus, we never would have discovered the larger organization." The federal trials took 2 years. Marcus testified against other network members in exchange for avoiding the death penalty, though his life sentence remained unchanged. His testimony revealed the full scope of the network's activities. They'd targeted children in 47 states, caused hundreds of hospitalizations, and in at least 12 cases, their experiments had resulted in children's deaths. The victims included children with autism, Down syndrome, epilepsy, severe allergies, diabetes, and other conditions that made them vulnerable to exploitation. The predators had viewed these children as test subjects rather than human beings. Marcus's role had been developing new methods for targeting allergic children. Lily's poisoning had been his proof of concept that led to systematic attacks on dozens of other children with food allergies. The psychological evaluations revealed that Marcus felt no remorse for his crimes, only anger at being caught. He viewed vulnerable children as inferior beings, whose suffering served a greater purpose in his twisted worldview. During his testimony, Marcus looked directly at me in the courtroom gallery and smiled. Even facing life in prison, he took satisfaction in knowing his methods had been replicated by others. That smile haunted me for months afterward. ignored. The network's takedown made international news. Documentaries were made about Operation Sanctuary, and my original website was featured as an example of how citizen journalism could expose criminal organizations. But the victory felt hollow, knowing how many children had suffered while authorities built their case. Lily was now 16, a junior in high school planning to study pediatric medicine. She'd learned the full truth about Marcus and the network on her 16th birthday when we felt she was mature enough to understand. Her reaction surprised me. Instead of trauma or fear, she felt determination. All those other children who were hurt because of what happened to me, she said quietly. I need to make sure it was worth something. Lily began volunteering with organizations that protected vulnerable children. She spoke at conferences about recognizing predatory behavior and advocated for stronger background check requirements. Her perspective as a survivor carried weight that professional advocates couldn't match. She could speak from experience about the long-term impact of predatory targeting. The families of other network victims reached out to our family. They formed a support network that continued meeting years after the trials ended. Rebecca Martinez, who'd helped expose Marcus at the summer camp, became a federal prosecutor specializing in crimes against vulnerable populations. She credited Lily's story with inspiring her career choice. David, Rebecca's brother who'd been systematically poisoned at the camp, graduated high school with honors despite his autism and the trauma he'd endured. He planned to study computer science and help develop better safety systems for vulnerable children. The children Marcus had targeted became advocates for others like them. Their survival and success proved that predators couldn't destroy the human spirit, only strengthen it. Marcus spent his life sentence in solitary confinement for his own protection. Other inmates had learned about his crimes against disabled children and made it clear he wouldn't survive in general population. His isolation was complete. No visitors, no correspondence, no contact with the outside world except through his lawyers. He'd created his own permanent prison through his choices. The network's other members faced similar fates. Most received life sentences, and those with shorter terms found that their crimes followed them everywhere. The comprehensive documentation made rehabilitation and reintegration impossible. 20 years after Lily's poisoning, I was invited to speak at the FBI Academy about citizen documentation of criminal activity. My case had become a teaching example for how private citizens could support law enforcement investigations. The presentation included photos of Lily at various stages of her life, as a baby recovering from Marcus's attack, as a teenager advocating for other victims, and as a young adult completing her medical degree. Her transformation from victim to healer illustrated why documenting predators was worth the effort. The original website about Marcus remained online, now expanded to include information about the entire network. It served as a permanent memorial to the victims and a warning about organized predatory behavior. Law enforcement agencies around the world used the site to train officers in recognizing network patterns. The detailed documentation had become a valuable resource for protecting vulnerable children globally. Marcus had died in prison after 22 years of solitary confinement. He'd never expressed genuine remorse, never acknowledged the humanity of his victims, never stopped viewing vulnerable children as acceptable targets. His death brought no satisfaction, only relief that he could never hurt another child. The Vulnerability Network's exposure had led to systematic changes in how institutions protected at-risk children. Background checks became more thorough, supervision protocols were strengthened, and reporting requirements were enhanced. Lily completed her residency in pediatric medicine and specialized in treating children with severe allergies. Her personal experience with targeted poisoning made her uniquely qualified to help other young victims. She married a man who shared her commitment to protecting vulnerable people. Together, they volunteered with organizations that supported families of children with special needs. On the 25th anniversary of her poisoning, Lily and I visited the memorial garden that had been created for the network's victims. 12 children had died from the predators' experiments, and dozens more had suffered permanent damage. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't documented everything? Lily asked as we stood among the memorial plaques. I thought about Marcus's smile in the courtroom, about the network that had learned from my methods, about the years it had taken to bring down the organization. I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't, I replied. The documentation had started as protection for one baby. It had ended up protecting thousands of vulnerable children by exposing a criminal network that might have operated for decades otherwise. Truth had power, even when predators tried to use that truth against other victims. Comprehensive documentation had ultimately served justice, even when the path was longer and more complicated than anyone expected. Lily placed flowers on each memorial plaque, reading the names of children who hadn't survived their encounters with network predators. Her survival and success honored their memory. I'm going to make sure this never happens again, she said quietly. She kept that promise. Over the following decades, Dr. Lily Johnson became a leading expert in protecting vulnerable children from predatory targeting. Her research and advocacy prevented countless attacks on defenseless victims. Marcus had thought poisoning a baby would bring him power and entertainment. Instead, he'd created a lifelong advocate who dedicated her career to protecting children like herself. The network he'd helped build was dismantled completely. The methods he'd developed were studied and countered. The vulnerable children he'd viewed as targets became the very people who ensured no future predators could replicate his crimes. In the end, love had proven stronger than cruelty. Protection had overcome predation, and truth, comprehensively documented, had served justice even when predators tried to corrupt it. The website remained online as a permanent testament to what happened when people chose to protect the innocent rather than ignore their suffering. Some battles are worth fighting forever. Protecting vulnerable children from those who would harm them was one of them. Marcus Thompson's name would always be associated with his crimes, but Lily Johnson's name would be remembered for the countless children she saved through her advocacy and medical care. That was the real ending to this story. Not the predator's destruction, but the survivor's triumph. Not the network's collapse, but the protection it inspired. Truth documented and preserved had protected more children than Marcus could ever have harmed. And that made every difficult moment of creating that first website worthwhile.